Hey you guys, I wanted to do a quick video on helping you guys throw with a metal rib. So I have a cylinder here and I haven't used the rib at all yet. I just threw it. It's still fairly thick because I want to go ahead and show you how I'm going to use this. First, let's talk about a few things. Using a metal rib, in my experience, works much better if your hands are relatively dry, or at least the part where you're going to be grabbing the rib with is free of slip. I think it also works better if the rib is clean. Reasons why is because it can slip out of your hands super easy if it's wet or slimy. Next thing, it is metal, so it's sharp. So you don't want to run it across your hands. It will cut you. But at the same time, it's also great for scraping the side of your pot. Not your hand though. So you want to use the blade to be able to almost act as if it's your finger to be able to raise the clay, shape the clay, press the clay against it, or also scrape the surface off, which is what I use it for a lot, in addition to shaping, in order to be able to pick the pot up off the wheel so it's kind of hardened and dry. So it bends back and forth, but yet will go back straight most of the time. In order to kind of bend it, you want to put your finger in the center and press your other fingers on the other side so that you can get it to the shape you want. Having the entire rib on the pot at one time is not a great idea. It tends to catch at some point. So kind of like when you're throwing and you don't want to have your whole hand touching the pot because it's just more surface contact and more likely for it to get caught. You don't want this whole thing to be touching the pot. Similarly, you don't want to lay it flat against the pot. So if it's like this, smashed against the side of the pot, it's likely to catch. You want to use the blade. And I usually, when I'm at the bottom of the pot, will start with using this piece, and then at the middle of the pot, we'll use more of a middle section, and the top of the pot, we'll use the top section. And I'm also, at the same time, kind of doing one of these inside the pot. So the clay is only touching this top of my fingertip and the top of this fingertip. It's not touching anything else on my hand, even though it might look like it. So I'm kind of pulling up. You can see the ridge where my fingers are. And I'm pressing against the rib at the same time. You can also see how as I go up this pot, different parts of the rib are touching. So when I was at the bottom, this part was touching. And then as I went up, this part was touching. Now I'm going to scrape it. You don't want to leave clay stuck on that. What happens is it acts as like a glue. So if you have clay stuck to here and you go to stick this back against the pot, what's going to happen is it's just going to suction cup itself to the pot, and then it's going to start sticking and you're going to have a rib flying around that likely is going to rip a hole in the pot. If your hand gets too dry, you can dampen the sides up a little bit. Sometimes I'll just take a sponge and kind of rub it against the sides. You don't want the clay to get crackly and crack off into the pot. So you see how it's jumping? And that's because I was kind of letting my finger bump around on the inside. You really have to be confident about your movements. So push on there. Don't let it bump around. That's when it's going to get caught. Alright, so I've formed the outside. Now I want to form the inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the rib around and use this side. And that contour is going to perfectly mimic what I want the top to look like. For me, I like to have a line of delineation because I like to use that for my transfer line. So I just use the top of the metal rib and kind of press in there. And that's where I know, okay, so I start from there and curl the top out. Clean the rib again. Clean your hand again. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to just make sure that the bottom is shaped the way I want. And again, I'm pressing against that rib. I'm not trying to do it in a hurry. Nice and slow because I don't want my hand to get stuck to the pot. And since I changed the bottom, I need to go back in and change the top, otherwise the top would be knocked off centered. And now you can see it's pretty dry. So my hands are dry, the pot is dry. And so the benefit of that is, if I can find, the benefit of that is when I slide the wire underneath, I can use this L shape on both hands, right up underneath the bottom, and pick it up. And the mug isn't wet, nor does it have slip on there. Press against the rib on the bottom, slowly turning the rib. Again, it's not flat, it's at an almost 90-degree angle, maybe like a, I don't know, I should really learn my degrees. It's like a this kind of an angle against the pot, maybe like a 45. Scrape that off, going back in and doing the same thing again. Okay. Now I'm going to scrape a little bit of this clay up from down here so I have a place to put the rib in. Getting all the clay off my hands. If you're worried about your hand up at the top part sticking to the rim when your hand is inside of there, go ahead and dampen that area of your hand with the sponge so that it slides along the clay. But learning how to curl your hand in such a way that it doesn't touch that part very much is a little bit more productive, because then you don't have to stop to wet your hand. Okay, take it out, look. I'm gonna go back in and just push it out just a wee bit more. And then I'm gonna use this to kind of clean it up. Okay, there we go. Clean that rib, it's ready for the next use. Now, all I had to do was kind of clean my fingertips off because everything else was dry, since I'm using the metal rib dry. Putting this board just to one side of you, not almost behind you, is a lot better as far as getting those off the bats. Alright, so if you guys have any questions, let me know on Instagram or message me here or email, and I can do my best to help you guys use a metal rib without slicing your fingers off.